fermented food and drink and get ready for a practical introduction to making some of the most useful and health-boosting ferments from scratch. So Charlotte Pike MBE is a food and drink expert whose work spans writing, consulting and speaking. She was awarded an MBE in 2024 for services to food writing and food education. And she's the author of 7 cookery books, one coming out today, which I'm sure she's going to tell you about. Some award-winning, some of those are very award-winning, and she shares her expertise through a popular Substack newsletter, radio, podcast and consultancy work. Charlotte also taught cookery classes for many years as one of the UK's leading independent cookery teachers. She's based in the English countryside and is a passionate home cook and keen no-dig kitchen gardener, which she might tell us about. Today she's here to show us how to make fermented food and drink that can improve your health, complete with a live demo. So please give a warm welcome to Charlotte Pike.
Good afternoon. And thank you for that introduction. So one of the reasons Catherine has very kindly asked me to speak to you today is because I wrote a book called Fermented, a book about food and drink, fermented food and drink, and how to incorporate fermented food and drink into your diet every day. And as Catherine said, also it's all happening for me today because my latest book, The Soup Solution, is actually out today as well. So I thought I'll bring that one along as well, and my other one, Quick Prep Slow Cook, which was out also within the last year. So I've been busy writing cookbooks, but it's really nice to visit this one, which I'm really, really proud of, and I'm going to be talking about some of that today. And as Catherine said, a little bit more about me. I'm a trained chef, and I actually trained at Ballymaloe Cookery School in Ireland, which is a largely organic cookery school based on a 100-acre farm, which is a particularly special environment to learn about food and how to cook. I also do work now as a food and drink consultant for brands and businesses, and I actually started my career working in financial services, first of all at JP Morgan, so it's really nice to be back in this part of town in a very different sort of context. And now I work with businesses to improve their food in offices and run talks and food tastings and food and drink education for people in the workplace as well, which is really exciting. So Fermented, the book, was actually published about 10 years ago, and at that time it was one of the early sort of major food and drink recipe books featuring fermented food and drink. And my aim for that was to show people just how to incorporate fermented food and drink into their diets every day. And that's something that, whilst a lot of us know a little bit more about fermented food and drink now, I still think is more important than ever, and actually can be a sort of persistent challenge for people to achieve that. So in terms of my approach, I am a cook, I am not a scientist, but I have learned how to ferment as a trained chef, and I really want to talk today about how best to work fermented food and drink into your diet every day. So let's talk a little bit first of all about fermented food and drink. So fermented food and drink have been enjoyed across the world for millennia. So this is nothing new, but the food and drink products that you find all across the world are actually possibly more familiar than you might realise. There are so many products that are very familiar to us that involve fermentation, such as sourdough bread, cheese, coffee, chocolate, wine, olives, for example. And lots of popular foods from around the world. You know, you've got kimchi, you've got labneh, got black beans, lots of lovely ingredients that are familiar, that happen to be fermented, so it happens very extensively. So the health benefits of a fermented food are really quite vast, and there's a lot of research that's taking place into it. So our understanding of the benefits of fermented food and drink is growing all the time. What we do know is that the fermentation process actually often pre-digests food, and what that does is it makes the nutrients within the ingredients more bioavailable, and that means that your body can access and process the nutrients within the food more easily. So that's got to be a good thing. And in some cases, the fermentation process actually generates additional nutrients in the food as part of the fermentation process, and it also can remove anti-nutrients and toxins. So you'll take a nutritious ingredient and you can actually make it more nutritious in terms of how the body can access the nutrition and actually improve what it does for the body through fermentation, which is very exciting. And what happens through the pre-digestion process is that the composition of an ingredient is actually changed throughout the fermentation process, and the bacterial cells actually perform a sort of digestive action, and that means that the minerals can be more bioavailable and the anti-nutrients are broken down as part of that process. So the toxins are removed as well, because what happens is the fermentation process creates bacterially produced acids, and they can also protect against potentially harmful pathogenic bacteria, so it actually can make our food more safe to ingest, which has to be a good thing. So the pre-digestion process also increases the number of B vitamins in the ferment compared to the raw ingredient, and that's where it gets quite interesting as well when it comes to fermenting, raw ingredients like this. You can actually increase the nutrition within the ingredient through the fermentation process. Of course, the ferments should contain live beneficial bacteria resulting from the fermentation process, and increasing the live beneficial bacteria you have as part of your diet can be significantly effective in terms of improving digestive health, immune function and overall well-being, which is really, really important. So we also know that by making improvements in that direction, a healthy digestive system can improve your overall health and well-being, and that is so important. So I became interested in fermentation actually when I was at Ballymaloe Cookery School in Ireland, and I studied it as a module on fermentation, and that was well over 10 years ago now, which was quite pioneering at the time. And that course covered a real range of basic ferments, and we had the opportunity to make and taste them all. And in fact now the cookery school actually has a fermentation shed in the grounds, so they have a converted refrigerator unit as a sort of fermentation cookery school there, and the shelves are lined with all sorts of jars of ferment, which I think is really, really innovative, and I encourage anyone who's interested to look it up. It's really, really inspiring. But you see, at that point I learned how to make a lot of ferments, which was really exciting, and I sort of had read about them over the years, but what I was really, really keen to do is actually understand how to use them as part of an everyday diet, because there didn't seem to be that much integration between these products and how best to enjoy them at their best, and also incorporate them into a diet. So I experimented quite a lot with that, which was really exciting. The thing is about fermented food is that in the sort of Western culture, sometimes it can feel a bit unfamiliar still. I mean, it's getting better, but cultures around the world still use so many fermented food and drink products as part of their diet every day, and unfortunately the sort of industrialization of our food systems really has stopped a lot of these food, this way of producing and consuming food and drink, and of course the sort of industrial processes, the transport, the packaging, and also the risk of a business in terms of producing food and drink products. A lot of our food that we're buying now is so sort of sterile and lacking in that live nutrition. So I think it's really important to understand how to improve that for overall health. So I went on a real sort of journey researching this book, which was really, really exciting, and I sort of wanted to produce a guide for people wanting to create fermented food and drink at home, and to show them what to do with it, which is really important. And that's what I want to do today. I'm really keen to focus on sort of the how is my approach. The why I sometimes leave to others, but I think the how is really important, because once you start to learn how to make fermented food and drink and how to incorporate them in your diet, it's a whole world that opens up, which is so exciting. And I've certainly found so many delicious ways of improving the fermented content of my diet, and I hope you might be inspired to do this too. So when I was researching the book, there were a lot of products that I tried that were sort of on the challenging end to make, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend them at home. So the products that I recommend making are ones that are reliable, they are successful, they work really well, and some products actually are really kind of not particularly well designed to be made at home. So everything I recommend to you is sort of easy and foolproof to try at home without needing too much specialist equipment and complicated processes to get right. So I think, to be honest with you, if you're going to get in the habit of doing it, having recipes and methods that actually feel achievable and integrate practically into your lifestyle, it's so important to maintain that rather than trying something too ambitious and then finding it's a short-lived project. And actually keeping it up is so important to get the benefit from it. So I think, if anything's too challenging to make at home, then you can look at considering buying it. And, buying fermented food and drink products is absolutely fine. I would just recommend to scrutinise your suppliers when you do so and make sure that you absolutely understand exactly how the products you're buying are made. So I recommend doing some research, because there are a lot of products out there that say that they have health claims in this department, but actually I would check if they are genuinely fermented, because some have added cultures, powders and what have you added to them rather than being produced in the traditional fermented way. And whilst that does give you some benefit, it is not actually produced in the traditional way. So you might want to look at using suppliers, if you're buying them, who actually really do genuinely ferment that information. And a lot of the businesses that do that will happily make that information available on their website, so it's really worth your time researching this. I recommend always looking at the ingredients list on products you buy. That's for products across the board, but particularly with fermented food and drink. You can find that some products just aren't necessarily what they claim by looking at the ingredients list. So make sure that you understand exactly what's going in them and how they're made, because you might find that they sound great, they look nice, but actually when you look at what's gone in there, it's not actually what you're expecting and won't deliver the health benefits you want. So that research is always extremely important. So let's talk about some specific fermented products now. So today I'm going to talk about some fermented drinks and some fermented foods. So what I want to do is I want to start with some fermented drinks to cover. And I think this is a really great place to start, not only for this talk, but also in life. So fermented drinks are probably one of the easiest, simplest and most beneficial ways you can start to add something fermented into your diet. So if you don't, this is completely new to you, this is a wonderful place to start. Now, fermented drinks, obviously you can buy them, they're available everywhere. Some of them are absolutely great, and some of them possibly aren't as beneficial as they might claim. But if you make them yourself, you will know exactly what's gone in them, and I think the fermented drinks are particularly easy to make, which is wonderful. They are also extremely high in health-giving properties, so some of the fermented drinks will offer you a huge, wide-ranging boost of health-giving properties, and they are a really wonderful thing to have. They are comparatively easy to fit into a busy lifestyle, so a lot of them are quite flexible, quite portable, and very, very quick to make as well as easy. They are generally liked by people of all ages, which has to be a bonus, and I think what's particularly nice about some of them is that they are very accessible to people with what I would probably call non-adventurous palates. So if you are wanting to support the health of people who possibly aren't so used to trying challenging flavours and textures, I think this is quite an appealing place to start and a good way of convincing them. They're a superb alternative to alcoholic or sugary drinks. So some of the fermented drinks have the most wonderful sort of effervescence, mouthfeel. And a lot of people do find that some alcoholic drinks and sugary bottled drinks, for example, one of the things they like about them is that effervescence, that mouthfeel, that body that is particularly satisfying in a way that you don't get from other drinks. So a fermented drink with a little bit of effervescence can offer a wonderful alternative to that, which is really nice. An additional bonus is that they will help to effectively collect the sugar in your system and help excrete it. So some fermented drinks will offer that as a benefit, which is really wonderful, particularly if you've had you've ingested a bit more sugar, maybe a special occasion or something that you would otherwise. It can be really nice for helping to rid your body of that, which can be a wonderful thing. So the fermented drinks are made using a culture, a live culture, and you will need a live culture to start to make them. Now, different cultures are used depending on the type of drink you want to make. Now, these cultures are not interchangeable, so you need to make sure that you use the type of culture that's appropriate for the drink that you're going to be making. So you don't need much equipment at all, that's the good news, and they don't take very long to make as well. So this isn't sort of, prep it, put it in the larder for a month, come back to it, strain it again, leave it for 3 months. It's very, very quick, and there's a sort of immediacy to a lot of the fermented drinks, which I really like. You need very, very little equipment. I have travelled up from deepest, darkest Dorset today, and I have brought everything on the train with me, so I'm travelling as light as possible. But you really don't need much, and you don't need much specialist equipment. So most people will probably have the equipment you need to make these sorts of drinks at home. And I'm going to start with the water kefir, and I'm going to show you this as my first fermented drink. Now, I'm starting with this, so I've brought some with me, but also I think this is probably the best place to start. If you want to try a fermented drink, this is a wonderful one to start with. Has anyone tried water kefir here before? Seeing lots of shakes of the head, that's great. So for me, water kefir is probably one of my favourites from a taste perspective. This is my water kefir here. Now, I will be honest, it looks a bit cloudier than it should do, but it's not been helped by me coming in on public transport, so it's been a bit sort of shaken up. This is about 3 days old in here, and water kefir tends to take 1 to 2 days to activate. So what I've done is I've got a batch of water kefir here. I'm going to show you how I make up another batch now, so you know. And the thing about making fermented products is because you need a culture, or you need some of the live product to make the next batch, you're in a constant sort of cycle of production. So actually what I'm going to be doing here today, and I realise I haven't got the bottle I meant to bring with me, but this will be exactly what I do at home, except I will bottle what I take off and have that ready to drink, and then make up another batch. So I'm going to open the lid. Did you hear a little fizz there? Just a subtle one. I talked about effervescence and body. Actually, this is probably one of the stiller ones. But of course, all fermented products, really, the longer you leave them, the bubblier and the livelier they get. So I'm going to pour my water kefir into a bowl through a sieve, and we'll talk about it. So just try not to spill it all over Catherine's nice tablecloth.
There's a muffin down the bottom.
Yeah, it is. So we're going to get to this. Right. So I don't know if you can see, it doesn't look very appealing. Attached to the walls of the container and in the sieve are my culture. This is my culture to make the water kefir. So I'm going to scoop some out.
It was the grains, yeah?
Exactly. So these are my water kefir grains. So you need to have some of these to make the water kefir. So they are quite soft in texture. They look quite clear. And remember, they are not interchangeable. So if you want to make water kefir, you need water kefir grains. You can buy them very easily online. I bought these from a good friend of mine called Catherine Gill-Martin, who runs a website called Every Good Thing. But there are lots of websites that sell these grains, and actually I've got some nice big grains here. There, so you can see they're slightly bouncy in texture. Now, I don't think we know exactly where these actually came from, and it's really interesting because I've been reading a study. Scientists have been working really, really hard to try and grow these in a lab to see if they can recreate them. Can they do that? They cannot. So you need to source these, and they are thought potentially to have originated from cacti in sort of, I think it was Mexico. So that's a line of thought as to the origins of them. And actually, to me, that feels in a way like it makes sense, even though I don't know, because water kefir has that lovely, almost sort of like aloe type freshness about the flavour that's so delicious. So it may be wrong, but actually I feel like there's that sort of juicy, sort of succulent flavour and texture in the mouth you get from those sorts of ingredients with water kefir. So to make a batch of kefir, you need about 2 tablespoons of these grains, okay, for my recipe. So what you do is you have to source them first of all, and you put them in a jar. Now it's absolutely fine to reuse the jar if you need to between sort of one batch, but if it goes longer than that, you might want to wash the jar, obviously. But you can find with the fermented drinks, with kombucha as well, and we'll get onto that, you end up with assorted yeasts that collect around the jar, and they can be quite beneficial in terms of getting the next batch going quite effectively. So whilst you need to make sure that everything you do is scrupulously clean, there is a case for leaving it from one batch to another occasionally to get the benefit of the live product that you've started to develop in the next batch. So I bought these online, and they came in a little pouch, and all you do is you take, my recipe is 2 tablespoons, and you put them into the jar. Now actually, I don't know if you can see from here, but there are differing sizes. Some, oh, that I've just dropped it in there, but some grains are really quite large, like that, and some are really small. They look like sort of little rubbly bits. And as your batches ferment and they grow, they will increase in size and volume. So once you start making it, you can, oops, I'm flinging them around. Once you start making that, you will find that the number of cultures you have will grow quite significantly, and you will be in a position to start giving them away to friends and family, for example, if they want to get into it. So you just need some to start, and they've got that slightly soft but firm texture. So you put your cultures in the jar, and you can use any sort of sterile container with a lid, but I'm quite fond of these jars. And you need some sugar. And I'm just checking because I've got some salt or something else. So salt is not going to work very effectively. So this, I think, is my sugar. Yeah. So I think it's really important as well to make sure that you use organic ingredients with fermented products, because a lot of the ingredients we use are heavily sprayed, and sugar is one of the most heavily sprayed crops around. So I would encourage you to use organic sugar if you can. So I'm going to put sort of roughly the same amount of sugar in there. Now sugar works really well. You can add things like honey. Some people add a couple of pieces of dried fruit, like a dried apricot or a dried raisin or something, to give it a boost. And then the water. So I've actually brought some mineral water with me. At home I would use filtered water. If anyone lives in London, I probably wouldn't recommend tap water unless you know that yours is pretty decent, because you can end up with too many other ingredients in there really that might inhibit the process. I'm not really a fan of using mineral water anymore, but mineral water will really help your water kefir to thrive, and it really likes the minerals in mineral water. So if you're having a bit of trouble with your fermented drinks, you might find doing a batch with some mineral water actually gives it a little bit of a boost. So I'm going to put my mineral water in here. This is 750, this bottle, but I would normally put about a litre in there. And close the lid, give it a shake, leave it on the side, room temperature, in your kitchen or wherever for 1 to 2 days, and it will be ready. So when it's ready, you want to have a taste. I'm just going to taste now and see how this is doing. This has had 3 days. This actually tastes quite supple, to be honest, but it's very light, cleansing and refreshing. And what you can do when you've fermented it for the first time is you can do what's called a secondary fermentation. A photo, yes I have, it's quite small. There's a photo on here. You can do a secondary fermentation. This is it here. You can add flavours in your secondary fermentation. So you can strain it off and have your plain water kefir, but you might want to add maybe some berries or something like we've done here in the photo, and you can just put the berries in for the second fermentation, and they will impart their flavour, which is really, really gorgeous. I'm just seeing if there's actually a photo. There's a photo here of the water kefir grains as well. I don't know if you can see a little bit more clearly from that. Oh yes, and these are the fruit water kefirs. So if you like fruit flavoured drinks, that's a really, really nice place to start.
2 days to ferment the second.
Roughly. But the
In the same jar.
I would take it out, drain off the culture, and then take this liquid, which is the fermented liquid, and add the fruit into this. And then that goes to make a batch of the master, if you like. Okay? So that's water kefir. Next, I want to talk about milk kefir. Now, milk kefir is great. Milk kefir is actually fermented milk. Now, you don't add sugar to that because there's a sugar that's naturally found in the milk that will cause the fermentation process. Now, that is really wonderful. Its consistency becomes thicker than milk when it's made up. So it's similar to a thin yoghurt. Its flavour varies from tart to really quite sour and acidic, and depending on how long it's fermented, it can be really quite effervescent. Some people find that a bit challenging, particularly with a dairy product. When it's a sort of fizzy dairy product, can feel a bit sort of challenging for some people. So that it will get bubblier if it's left in a sealed container. It is said to be one of the most nutritious of all ferments. So I really strongly recommend that if you're going to have anything, that's the one to have. I have a little bit for my breakfast every morning, and it's a nice way of having it. It's very widely enjoyed in Eastern Europe. Think what you may of this, but apparently it's Mr. Putin's secret for a long life, apparently, but lots of people swear by it in Eastern Europe. And actually, if you're buying a probiotic drink, you may find that this actually offers everything you want and more. Now, the milk is fermented by the addition of kefir grains, but because they're not interchangeable, as I said, you will need to get milk kefir grains. They look reasonably similar to these in terms of shape, but they're sort of milky, translucent and whiter in colour. So they are actually what's called a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, and they are polysaccharides which actually have up to 30 bacterial and fungal species inside. So you must make sure you get the milk kefir grains rather than the water kefir, and you use them on a rotation basis. You ferment one batch and use them to make the next. Now, I haven't brought them, and I haven't brought the milk because I've had to come here on public transport, and also there's no facilities here. So I haven't brought them because I haven't been able to keep them chilled. But what you do is you get the milk kefir cultures, and you simply combine them with milk. 2 tablespoons and a litre of milk. That's all you do. I use organic whole milk as standard, and you can use unhomogenised if you like, completely up to you. But the sort of more natural and unprocessed the milk, generally the livelier result you'll get. Some people have experimented with fermenting non-dairy milks, but it doesn't really work in the same way. So by all means, experiment with it, but it won't produce the same sort of results. So I haven't bought it for that reason. It is probably the most challenging fermented drink to make at home, simply because of the restrictions of dealing with the shelf life, effectively, of a dairy product. So milk kefir is a great one to do on a day-to-day basis, and actually if you leave it out at room temperature, which is fine within the context of what we're trying to achieve here, you can make up a batch by mixing the grains in the milk, leave them overnight and have it the next day, or sort of 2 days, and the milk will thicken to a more yogurty consistency overnight. So it's a really quick turnaround. I mean, you can leave it for more time, but it does get funkier and bubblier and more acidic. I personally prefer it on the sort of younger end of the scale, and a lot of people, particularly people who are new to fermented products, prefer that as well. So it has its limitations. You can freeze the cultures, which is quite useful. I will be completely honest, because I travel quite a lot, that's the one that I make less frequently at home. I tend to buy it, actually. I really recommend looking very closely, as I said earlier, about which one you buy. I have no affiliation with any brands whatsoever. I bought it empty. This is the one I buy at home. This is Jester's Lady's Organic Kefir. This is made in Gloucestershire. This, for me, I think is the most delicious one. It's got 3 stars at Great Taste, which is the top award, and it comes in a 750 bottle. Now, they advise you have a 150 ml, so it's about 5 days supply. I have maybe half a glass, a water glass, in the morning. You find loads available to buy. Check the labels, because some of them have powdered cultures added rather than our genuinely fermented product. Once you've tasted the texture and flavour of a genuinely fermented product, you'll know what's what. Same with some of the kefir yogurts as well. You're probably not getting exactly what you think you might. So I think just, make sure you have a careful look at what you buy. And I've no affiliation to that brand, I just like it. And also they do mail order as well across the country, which is quite a nice way of buying it, because sometimes you just can't find these things in the shops very easily. So that's a really great place to start. Now I mentioned the sort of, hello?
Is it 2 tablespoons
Yes.
to a litre?
Yes, roughly.
If you want to make half of that, just
Yeah,
1
and
tablespoon and half a litre.
yes, and I know someone who has a very elderly mother who is widowed and is, I think, in her 90s, and actually she's making her own every day, but she has a small appetite and obviously one-person household. She actually makes it in a little spice jar that's washed up. One of those little jars with a lid. You can make a tiny quantity, and obviously the cultures will multiply, but that's still really a wonderful way of doing it. So you don't feel you've got to create vast volumes of things if you're not going to get through it. I mentioned the sort of the discipline of having to make this every day, but you can find as well, you have people who are forget having a dog sitter. There's a SCOBY hotel system. So if you go away, you can actually have someone to look after your cultures for you. So if that's a problem, that is available. Now let's talk next about kombucha, and I really want to cover kombucha because I think it's wonderful. Let me find a photo of some kombucha. Now a kombucha is a fermented tea. This is another fantastic fermented drink. So this is my kombucha here. Now fermented, it's a fermented sweetened tea. It can be made with black, white or green tea, and again it's produced with a SCOBY. Now the SCOBY for a kombucha is unique to making a kombucha. Unfortunately I don't have a photo of it. They probably, I can't remember how we organised things with this book, but I think they probably decided that it wasn't exactly the most attractive thing to photograph. So I do encourage you all later to go and just type into your phone, have a look for an image of a kombucha SCOBY. It is not a thing of beauty, but it's incredibly effective. So this actually resembles the mother that you'll find with a vinegar. So it's called a mother quite often with a kombucha. And it's a sort of like gelatinous ball, effectively, which doesn't sound very attractive. But you put it into cold, sweetened tea, and it will ferment, and the grains will multiply, but the mother for kombucha will grow. So say you put, I end up doing these great big jars full of things. If you put a little bit of a SCOBY mother in this, it will grow, so it will fill out to the sides and cover the surface. And once it reaches that point, it will thicken and it will grow layers. And you can pull them apart, or you can cut it apart and use a piece to make the next batch. And you'll find you end up with lots of strands of yeast growing in your kombucha. And you may end up with a bit of sort of like silt, and it may look a bit bitty in the jar, but that's actually fine. They are the natural yeast that is occurring in a kombucha, and that's fine. And in that case, it is absolutely fine to leave that in when you add the next lot of ingredients in to make your next batch, because that's going to give it a nice boost.
Beetroot's kombucha.
Sorry?
Anyway, beetroot's kombucha.
I've never tried that. You need tea, so you need to flavour it with beetroot, possibly later on. So I think kombucha is wonderful. It is really delicious. I find it's really moreish. I find once you get the taste for it, I think a lot of people do find themselves sort of craving it. There are a huge number of health claims that I've read about that are associated with the consumption of kombucha, including treating arthritis, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, and loads of other disorders. So I think it's something that has the potential to be extremely beneficial for the body. It's said to contain glucuronic acid, which is a compound produced in our livers that actually binds toxins and helps to eliminate them as well, which is interesting. So you make it by making a sweetened tea. You can sweeten it with sugar, you can sweeten it with honey, you can make it, you do need some sweetness in there for the fermentation process to activate, but you can actually moderate how sweet it is depending on your taste. You make the sweetened tea, you cool it, you put the culture in and you ferment it. This needs longer, something like 5 days. The longer you leave it, the punchier the flavour and the more effervescent it becomes. So I mentioned the sort of body and effervescence of some alcoholic sweet drinks. This is a particularly lovely place to replace that. If you like that quite fizzy body of maybe a beer or, I don't know, a cola or something, this might be up your street. Now, it's a wonderful thing to make. It's quite flexible as well. If you go away for a fortnight, it'll probably be fine. So you've got a bit more flexibility in there as well, which is wonderful. You do find lots of commercial kombuchas available to buy, and some of them are really nice. Some of them are better than others. Again, I come back to my point, look at the ingredients, because some of them have sort of cultures added rather than being sort of genuinely fermented. I would just really research who you're buying from and how they're making it.
Where do you get the SCOBY?
Online, same sort of.
Same thing?
If you look online, based on where you live, you will find suppliers. There's a number of ones that I've used online. I buy a lot of supplies from my local health food shop. I've got a great one in Dorset, I've got a great one in Oxfordshire, and often if you ask, they'll get them in as well. So, but online you can find suppliers. I've used Every Good Thing recently, and she's absolutely brilliant and has them for sale. In terms of buying them, I quite like LA Brewery is really nice. There's a brilliant company in Northern Ireland called Mucha Kombucha I like. I have no affiliation with the brands, but they do a flavoured kombucha, and of course you can secondary ferment kombucha to add flavour. So I'm going to talk about one more drink that you might not think is a drink, and then we'll talk about food. So what I want to talk about next is vinegar. So vinegar, so the alcohol in wine or vinegar is wine or cider, is actually fermented into vinegar, and it has the addition of an aerobic bacteria, acetobacter. Okay, so this processes the alcohol into acetic acid or vinegar. So this must be made with the mother, and that is actually a sort of jelly blob that will grow. And you may find sort of strands throughout the vinegar and a sort of yeasty residue at the bottom of the bottle. You may find even just when you're cooking with vinegar at home, if you look at what collects on the bottom of the bottle, if you've had it in the cupboard for a while, they will be the yeasts from there, even though the mother won't be with it. Sometimes you'll find the mother growing. So if you look at your vinegar and you think, oh heck, what's happened there? That's what's happening, and that's actually a really good sign. So you need a bit of mother for the vinegar. That is harder to buy. You can sometimes grow one yourself. You will find that if you have a natural live vinegar, it will spontaneously grow, but you will need to source one. So great quality vinegar is absolutely delicious as a dressing to add flavour. So when I make salads, and I've had one today with a really nice live vinegar dressing, that could be a lovely way of adding some extra prebiotics and fermented goodness into your meals. But also it's fantastic taken as a drink daily, okay? So try 1 teaspoon or even 1 tablespoon if you're feeling bold, mixed with a small glass of water. You must dilute it, otherwise it'll give you stomachache. I've tried it, it's not very nice. But it's a really great habit to get into. I know so many people who have a little bit of vinegar and a sparkling water as a little aperitivo drink. Now I see possibly some sceptical faces. I think it's delicious and possibly worth a go. It's harder to make. I buy vinegar, but I'm very fussy about the vinegars I buy. I want to make sure they are high quality, genuinely fermented. I brought one along. I actually really like this brand. No connection to them. This is their slightly fiery one. It's got turmeric and ginger in. They do. It's got a bit of chili in as well. They do a turmeric. But they are, when you buy a really great quality vinegar, they are so delicious. You can genuinely have half a teaspoon of it and drink it and think, wow, that tastes amazing. So I really, really recommend that. You'll find, obviously, lots of people have the shots and things. I quite like these ones, but just read the ingredients. Some of the ones you see in the airport, for example, are basically 95% apple juice or something, so they're probably not going to do exactly what you want. But a little shot of great vinegar, just out the bottle, have a dose of it every day, or possibly even a little made-up shot, is a really nice way of upping your intake of fermented food and drink. So there are a few drinks, and I think they're a really wonderful place to start. Let's talk about the foods now. So sauerkraut is one of my favourites, and I think this is a great place to start when it comes to fermented foods. Now, I brought some along here, and let me explain to you what I've done. So let's get a fork. I think sauerkraut is a great place to start because it's quick to make, it's cheap, it's delicious, a lot of people like it, and it just sort of opens the door to fermented vegetable products. Now, you'll need some sort of jar like this to make it. Let's unpack it and I'll show you what I've done. In case you're thinking, oh my god, what's happened? This is actually paper, and I put the paper in to try and press the contents down a little bit and to try and keep some air out. So I've opened it, I've already got a light sort of vinegary aroma on the nose. So let's have a look. Now what I've done here is I've actually put, this doesn't look very attractive, but it's a good way of doing it, is when I prepared the cabbage, I took some of the leaves off and I laid them on top of the kraut. What that does is it prevents oxidization and it forms a good base for pressing down the cabbage. Now, it smells a bit vinegary, it should be quite moist, even though it looks quite dry. I'm just going to have a taste. That's tasting really good already. So, it looks reasonably dry, but actually, if I press it down with a spoon, can you see there's actually quite a lot of liquid in there.
Yeah.
This is so easy to make, and actually I really like this plain white kraut. It's really versatile to add to a whole range of dishes and really useful. So to make it, it's incredibly simple. What you do is you take some cabbage. Now, I thought I need to cut it. I bought a whole cabbage. I need to cut this up. So I'll bring a knife, and then I realised I'm coming to London, and because I'm a chef, I've only got super duper knives. So probably get arrested if I put that in my bag. So I quartered this in advance, and I just cut it up on the microplane. Now, the kraut, I think, works really well if it's sliced really thinly. So a lot of these harder vegetables are gorgeous in salads and things like fennel, which is also great in a kraut, but you need it to be really thin, and that helps to get water out. And I like the texture of it when it's fermented. It has a sort of softness. So this is also Japanese mandolin, a company called Benrina. If you're going to get a mandolin, get a professional one. Don't buy one from the department store or something, because this is in another league for the same price. It's kind of the same for kitchen equipment. Don't buy the stuff that's designed to be for the home. Get the professional stuff, because it won't cost you any more, but it'll perform about 100 times better. So I'm not going to do too much of this because sod's law, I'll get distracted by talking and take my finger off. So you want to slice the cabbage as finely as possible. So I've only done a little bit here, but there's a little bit. And actually, when you slice it really thinly, you can feel it's a little bit moist in your fingers. That's a great sign. So what you do is you take some salt, and a lot of recipes say about 2%. Take some salt, and again, I mentioned organic. I only personally cook with pure sea salt. Rock salt's fine, sea salt's my preference. I wouldn't use anything that's called table salt in any cooking in my kitchen because it has all sorted anti-caking agents. It's a very low grade salt, and actually if you use sea salt you get lovely minerals from it, but also it will genuinely enhance the flavour of the food. So it won't taste salty, it'll just completely elevate what you're tasting. And of course we've got no nasties in here to interfere with the fermentation process. So I am pure sea salt all the way. And actually there's some really nice companies around. They're doing some really beautiful salts that are really worth experimenting. I'm just putting a little bit in, so I'm making it the tiniest little bit. But if you slice your cabbage really, really thinly and you toss it in the salt, you can really feel it starts to release a lot of water. And then what you do effectively is you just pack it into a jar. So you just take an empty jar, drop all this in, and then you press it down. So I am quite happy, at home I will use my hand and just really pack it in. And can you see how much liquid is coming off that? You'll find when you make it that initially you won't get as much liquid of that. This is 5 days old, so I did this at the weekend, but you get quite a lot coming off of it. You need to press it all down. So this jar was practically full 5 days ago, and then I took the outer layers of the cabbage off, put them on top, and actually I started to put a weight on there to really keep the cabbage submerged. So what we're doing here is we're doing an anaerobic fermentation, so we want the cabbage to ferment submerged in the liquid. We don't want the air, so the air will cause it to perish. So some people use like a washed weight, for the old scales, kitchen scales, or some people use a stone. You can buy glass weights that are used to press it down, or just improvise. I have actually put a cabbage leaf on and then put like a heavy jar inside or something. So as long as it's clean and heavy enough, that's fine. And then once the cabbage starts to break down, it will release more water, become more fizzy. And this is fine to eat after 5 days. This is just a pure unadulterated flavour with just the cabbage and the salt. You can add other ingredients, you can add turmeric, spices. You see all sorts of, if you go to the health food shop, beetroot for example, you can find all sorts of interpretations. This is kind of the sort of the base, the master recipe, and then you can go from there. And I find this is one of the most versatile and useful things to have around. It's seriously delicious. It's really rich in fibre, it's rich in vitamin C, vitamin K, folate, iron, short chain fatty acids that can help reduce inflammation. So it's a great thing to have. So kimchi is a variation of this, and lots of people have heard about kimchi. That tends to be, it's Korean. It's a fermented Chinese leaf cabbage with lots of chili and lovely flavours in there. So it's often got ginger in. It's kind of, because the Chinese leaf cabbage, which actually is very easy to find nowadays. When I was writing the book, I was trekking around Chinatown trying to get one, but actually like Waitrose will often have them in now, big Sainsbury's or something, so you can get hold of it, particularly if you live in the sticks like me. And it's a much softer cabbage. It's more like, this is obviously really hard and crunchy in its raw form. Chinese leaf feels a bit almost more lettuce-like it's softer and more succulent and will go quite translucent when it's fermented. So kimchi is delicious, it's spicy, it's zingy. You need a lot more ingredients to make it, but it's really gorgeous, and you can buy some really good pre-made ones as well. So if you want to investigate kimchi, that's absolutely fantastic, and I really recommend that. I also really recommend fermented vegetables. We've got some on the front of the book, some recipes. You can actually ferment vegetables in a brine, and I like carrots with dill. This is a radish with fennel and dill, and they're really nice, sort of fermenting them for about 5 days, and they're sort of crunchy with a little bit of an acidic tang. That's a really, really nice thing to do, and very easy. It's quite nice to use them as crudités as well, if you like a little nibble with a dip or something. That might fit the bill, so that's a really nice thing to consider. You can also ferment fruit if you wanted. Things like cherries will ferment really nicely. Some fermented fruit can be a nice way of adding a sort of more health-giving pudding into your diet occasionally. I don't know how many of you have been to Morocco, but lovely preserved lemons you see there. In fact, we can buy them here. They are actually fermented by fermenting the lemon in salt. And you slit the lemons, you salt them, you press them down, and the salty juices will cover the lemon, and they will ferment. So preserved lemon is a fermented lemon. They are really delicious and a lovely seasoning as well. If you want to find more ways of cooking them, just have a look at Ottolenghi's recipes online, for example. There are loads of them that use preserved lemons. That's a lovely way of adding more flavour and fermented goodness to your meals. Yogurt is another wonderful, wonderful fermented product. I try and have a bit of yogurt every day. It's very, very easy to make from scratch at home if you want to. Fermenting milk with a starter culture. You can actually use some live yogurt, a couple of spoons of it, to ferment fresh milk into yogurt. So you can do that lovely cycle, and all you've got to do is to buy even a small pot of genuinely live yogurt, and you can start to make your own. It has wonderful, wonderful health-giving properties, and it is really, really delicious. I tend to buy it, to be honest, again because of the practicalities, but I will always buy one again that is genuinely fermented, because some have cultures added. So look at this is just one I've had recently. I like it's empty, so it's not all sort of going off, but just the really good quality artisan yogurts are fantastic. They vary quite enormously in terms of flavour and texture, even if you're buying from the same brand quite often. Like this brand, Jess's Organic Ladies, do a really lovely yogurt. But every batch is different, and that's actually the wonderful thing about a live artisanal product. It's not sort of standardised in the same way. But yeah, just really check what's in there. I like this one, but there are so many more out there. Just read the label, and that's a really great thing to do. I personally wouldn't buy yogurt now if it weren't live. I think that makes such a difference. So that's a really nice thing to add. Miso we've got soy. They're lovely ingredients to add a bit more fermentation. Soy is lovely. This is one of my current favourites. This is a really beautiful one. I can drink this by the spoonful. But by looking at the ingredients and buying a genuinely fermented one, you haven't got caramel colours and sugar syrup added and what have you. You get the real deal and the benefits from it. Tempeh, sourdough, they're really nice ways of introducing fermented products to your diet. I would like to talk a bit more about that, but I'm aware of time, so I'm not going to. I'm going to start to sum up now, because time's ticking, isn't it, Catherine? Sorry about that. Equipment, really quickly, all you really need are some jars. Some flip-top jars are brilliant. These are Le Parfait, they're from France, I love them. Kilner are fine, but they haven't got as wide a neck, so these are quite easy to use. A mandolin is great if you've got one, but other than that, use anything you've got in the kitchen, just make sure it's really clean. In terms of adding fermented food and drink to your diet every day, start little by little. If you're not having any already, just start little by little. It can be a little, shall we say, explosive if you go too heavy on fermented products if you're not used to it. So even a couple of tablespoons will give you a benefit. So don't feel like you've got to go too far too quickly. Just start slowly and build up. Savoury breakfasts are great with fermented veg, for example. Add some sourdough to your breakfast, some kraut on the side of your lunch, or kimchi, little milk kefir every day, some yoghurt instead of a pudding. Some swap your drinks with some water kefir or kombucha, for example, could be a nice way of doing it. These are really practical ways to incorporate fermented products in your everyday diet. And I think fundamentally, variety and diversity is key, so making sure that you've got the broadest range of food and drink in your diet every day. So really quickly, I'm sorry I'm rushing, I'm sorry Catherine, but ultimately, to conclude, adding fermented food and drink to your diet is one of the best things we can all do for our health. Genuinely, it will make such a difference, and actually simple, homemade is best, or from a trusted supplier. Use organic ingredients if you can. Research who you're buying from. It's absolutely fine to buy them from elsewhere, but just understand what you're buying is really important. Choose high quality, genuinely live products. Start small and build it up. And actually just try and have a little bit every day. Once you can, have a little bit, try and add a little bit to every meal, for example, and build up. And you'll find it's amazing how your body actually craves it after a while. People go on holiday and don't have any fermented stuff for a couple of weeks, and you think, oh, I really feel like I need that. And finally, I heard a really brilliant piece of advice from a food writer called Tim Hayward at the weekend. He said, do not buy or eat anything where the love isn't evident, if you have agency to do so. And I thought, I really do believe in that, and I think, showing yourself a bit of love by making amazing fermented food and drink products, or buying genuine products made by people who care, that will really, really benefit your body, your mind, your overall well-being, is just so, so important. And if you can, I cannot encourage you to do it anymore. So I'm sorry I've rushed through to the end, but I'd like to thank you so much for having me, for bearing with me until the end. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I haven't got any books here, but if anyone's interested in a book, these are they, and they're available online and in all good bookstores. And if you'd like a some personalised copy, then let me know and we can organise that. So thank you again so much, and thank you, Catherine, for having me.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was absolutely